Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks.
What up,
Welcome
y'all?
to
This
Tone
Tone Talks in the building. Apologize for running a bit late. You know, we here now. We're going to have this discussion about Puff Daddy. We're going to have a powerful discussion about all the things that go into like Puff Daddy's whole imagery here. You know, the name of the show is Puff Daddy Variety and Revolt TV. Can Diddy be a black culture warrior after firing a bulk of his black staff at Revolt? This is the question that we got to ask ourselves. We start looking at this thing, and you got the Variety article where he says, I'm a culture warrior. That's what's on the cover of it. But you hired an Indian to be the CEO of Revolt TV. But you selling us cheap table grapes in Ciroc. Come on. You the threading of the decadent veil. And for those people that don't know, just go Google decadent veil. We doing 102 today. We ain't going backwards. I appreciate everybody spending their Friday here at Dash Radio. Press the Dash Talk app. You can catch this on streaming live on Tone Talks YouTube. When I refer to the chat, I'm referring to the YouTube chat. You can join that as well. We be in there fighting, dialoguing, growing, building. Join in. Also, use the super chat. Please support this channel. Support Dash Radio, support Dash Talk X. We doing it here, but we about to get into it. You know, I looked at this Puff Daddy article. I did a short video earlier this week, but I had to get into it a little more. I had to dig up some of the facts on Puff Daddy. Come on. You know, when I see this thing, I see in so many ways that Puff Daddy has created an imagery as though he ain't been here for a long time, selling us those cheap table grapes at Ciroc. Been here for a long time selling us that cheap clothing at Sean John. I respect black business, but we gotta be real when black business ain't right. And for me, in a lot of ways, what I'm starting to see is that black folks need a hero. And when they try to make that hero out of somebody that's a corporatist, what ends up happening is we end up in the same place we were before we had any access anyway. But we gonna get into it. Let's get into the questions. Y'all know I do this by questions. And number one, does Puff Daddy's Variety cover story make sense? On black CEOs, Black Panther, black CEO leadership, and the lack of black capital ownership. Number two, Revolt TV hired Roma Karma as the CEO. She's a Canadian Indian. And then in June 18, they hired her in September of 17. Then by June 18, she firing over 30% of the black staff. She fired 30% of the staff of Revolt. 99% of those people were African Americans. How does this make sense with Puff Daddy's culture warrior spread on Variety? Does it make any sense? Come on. Let's get it. I look at the next question. If Roma Karma shows what was stated in the page 6 article, the page 6 came out and said that Roma Karma, the CEO, is racist, or actually she made racist statements. That's purportedly according to a staff member at Revolt. The anonymous staff member sent a letter to the board saying certain things. Should she be terminated if that's the case? Because Diddy's standing behind her. Diddy's standing behind her as the black culture warrior. He is. This is his statement as I understand. Revolt is led by a woman of color. This is what he said to TMZ, who is expected to uphold the same standards that I hold for all my companies. After an extensive review led by outside counsel, there were no findings of deliberate misconduct. At this time, Roma Karma will remain CEO of Revolt. You know what I'm saying? This is what we're starting to see, is that the reality behind America, the reality behind everything that we think America to be, isn't altogether true. You look at this article by Truth Dig called The Diversity Con, and in it, none other than Mr. Ford from Black Agenda Report rips diversity apart. Puffy's leaning on diversity. Puff Daddy's leaning on diversity, and we up here trying to fight for access for African Americans, American DOS. I should be more specific. So number 4, look into the weak memorandum of understanding. There's this memorandum of understanding that Al Sharpton, Mark Morial of the Urban League, the NAACP signed back in 2010 with Comcast. And that gave the doorway for Magic to get Aspire Channel and Puff Daddy to get Revolt. But was that memorandum strong enough? We're going to go through that. And number 5, is Diddy a key component of the decadent veil of black celebrity? Black power, while really being a super capitalist. He talking all this black power, but he really, you look at the history with Mace and with the locks and with, with everybody, it's hella questionable. Even with the black community at large, you got the picture with Trump, still hasn't been explained. You can't play both sides of the fence. So let's go back up to number 1. Does Puff Daddy's Variety cover make sense on black CEOs and Black Panther? I kind of covered this because I'm gonna read a section from his article, and I don't know if he knew that Roma Karma was gonna get blasted the way she was, because the article's about him being a culture warrior, and in it he talks about record companies hiring CEOs that are from overseas. Then we turn around and you done hired an Indian CEO to represent Revolt TV and to take Revolt TV to the next level as far as content goes. None of that makes any sense. So a Canadian Indian is going to represent what black culture is today. How? So let me share a couple of the words here. If you have any issues with the sound, please go to Dash Radio, press the Dash Talk app. You can follow along there as well. So this is Puff Daddy's actual words. You have these record companies that are making so much money off our culture, our art form, but they're not investing or believing in us. For all the billions of dollars that these executives have been able to make them, there's still hesitation to put them in the top level positions. They'll go out and they'll recruit cats from overseas. So this is Puff Daddy talking about, I guess Universal, and he's talking about Sony, but we can't look at Revolt TV and see Roma Karma and not ask the same question. There was no African-American female. There was no African-American male to take that position. Possibly not, because diversity has shut us out. So you look across at Google, you look at all these different companies. All the Indians have taken these positions through the window of diversity. How much access are African Americans getting, American DOS, to learn the skills that they need to be able to be called upon when Puffy needs somebody to run his station? This is the con of it all. What we see is that even when it's an African American male that's supposed to be speaking for black folks, he chooses otherwise as well. You continue on, and what else he says is, that's just as bad as the fact that there are no black majority owners in the NFL. That's what really motivates me. He said Black Panther was a cruel experiment because we live in 2018 and it's the first time the film industry gave us a fair playing field on a worldwide blockbuster and the hundreds of millions it takes to make it. I have to ask myself, does he know what's going on? Black Panther was an extension of the whole Marvel universe owned by Disney, put into the Disney engine of marketing. Am I taking away from Coogler directing it? No. But we know Ava DuVernay turned it down because it was very limited what they were willing to let you do. So this idea that Black Panther was the creation of the black mind totally negates the fact that Jack Kirby wrote the character initially. This old white man named Jack Kirby. What happens here is Puff Daddy mixes in and he flips between black ownership and black marketing. And then he just sells it to us as the same thing. And I think for a lot of us, we don't know the difference. We don't know the difference between a 50-50 partnership with Ciroc and a 50-50 ownership. We don't know the difference when you sell Sean John after we supported it for $100 million or whatever it is. And we'll get into that in a second. And then you just kind of like don't really make no news of that. But then you come into Variety and talk about black ownership. All while you let an Indian head your company and fire all the black staff. None of this makes sense. And the point of this is to say what's happening now is I believe that black celebrity is on its last leg. I did the piece on black celebrity and the end of it. We sitting up here and Puffy, almost 50 years old. We watch all these 50-year-old people trying to hold on and sell us aspiration. They trying to get in on this stuff that we bring into the table. Myself, William Darity, Dark Hamilton, Yvette Carnell, and they trying to jump in now and be part of the bigger discussion of wealth inequality while they rich, and while they're rich from selling basically BS. Let's keep going on this thing and flesh this thing out. Again, you can call 323-879-4445. Join the discussion. Phone lines are opening up. We're going to make sure that we have this dialogue, because I really felt when I looked at Puff Daddy and I looked at what he was representing and bringing in this discussion, it didn't really line up with what I saw in his practices, what I've seen in his history. You start looking at this article from page 6. Page 6 has this article, and let me be fair and read it as it is. The title of it is CEO of Diddy's Revolt Network accused of racism. And this is what the ex-worker wrote. From a place of genuine concern on behalf of myself as a young, educated black woman, for the people currently employed at Revolt who are fearful of losing their jobs, and in an attempt to preserve the reputation and perception of this company, in a bombshell letter, she alleged, I witnessed CEO Roma say that black women intimidate her. I'm going to stop there for a second. So here you have a lady that Puff Daddy has trumpeted around and trying to hold her together as a person of color. And right off the bat, we see black women intimidate her. Part of the reason she's been able to access this whole space is that she kind of looks like you. No clearer example makes that the case than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is half Jamaican and half Indian, Canadian as well. Canadian Indian, just like Roma. But somehow, because she looks like you, you can be black girl magic while she fires you. And I'm not talking about Kamala right now. I'm talking about Roma. And then you don't realize that she was always intimidated by you. So she says, I witnessed Roma say that black women intimidate her. And then at a May brainstorming session for Revolt Music Conference, when it was suggested that rapper Meek Mill host a talk on prison reform, Roma responded, maybe the conversation isn't about prison reform. Maybe it's about how to stay out of jail, black boy. So here we at Revolt TV that came through a memorandum of understanding that was, while weak, somehow got Puff Daddy of all people to run a station, a guy that don't know nothing about running no TV station. And while at this supposed black empowerment company, while talking about mass incarceration to an Indian from Canada, she called the person who was victimized, and I'm gonna call Meek Mill a victim in this case because we know what happened with the judge. You can go Google that. A boy. This makes no sense. It doesn't even make sense without Puffy calling himself a culture warrior. But it makes even less sense with him calling himself a culture warrior. Because you can't have this happen in your station and the person that said that keeps their job, let alone how do they get their job? So I'm looking at this thing and I continue on. The memo adds, in my own discomfort, I spoke up. This is the person that wrote the letter to anonymous employee, saying that her, meaning CEO Roma's, comment was not only insulting, but would also be disrespectful to Meek, as he's not a boy. She then stated back, maybe that's it. Maybe it's a conversation on how not to be black. So what's up with Puff Daddy and Revolt TV? This is the whole point of it, right? And this is the point of why I say that Puff Daddy and the corporatists and Russell Simmons with his rush card, and I'm throwing him in there too, and Jay-Z with you saw him with Tidal, and you looked at the staff was all white. Just having a black person at the top when they don't know nothing about being black and running black people in the right direction ain't gonna fix none of this. And I'm saying this to say the last part of this is probably the most damning of the whole thing. It says the letter alleged Roma let 30% of the Revolt staff go for restructuring, and 99% of those are African Americans. So you've hired this woman to fire these black folks because she just got hired in September. Let me say that again. You hired this Canadian Indian to fire these American DOS people. And you didn't even do it. Come on, Puff Daddy. They got the whole letter where it's from Roma. Puff Daddy, you the culture warrior. Call everybody in for a dinner and explain to them what happened, why their family ain't gonna be able to eat. It's all right. That's what come with this. That when you really about black folks, that's how you do it. You don't have a Canadian Indian that just came through the door that calls black people black boys, send out the conference, the letter. None of this makes any sense. I start to look at this thing and I feel in so many ways, I look at Puff Daddy different than other people. I understand y'all look at him as the guru or whatever y'all look at him as. I done met too many people that's really moving. I look at the fact and I look at the full body of work. I look at how he's treated employees according to their statements over time. I look at the products that he sold us, liquor made from table grapes at premium prices. And I begin to question the whole thing. I see this thing and you start to break Puff Daddy down and you say, who really owns Ciroc? There's this article that came out, I'm sharing a little bit of it. The whole thing he pitched to us as black folks is that he owned it. And either he said it directly or he implied it, so everybody thought he owned it. Then it comes out, and this is the article. I was shocked when I found this out. Diddy has a beefed up endorsement deal between him and the owners of the drink. They have a 50-50 split of the profits from Ciroc. Profits mean after the production, marketing, and any other cost associated with producing Ciroc. So we supported this liquor. I ain't gonna say Billy D. Williams, but I'm gonna say Billy D. Williams. We supported this liquor under the guise that it was black owned. One of the things that we gotta see with this whole thing of what's going on is one of the reasons we don't own anything is because they got covers. They got these people that they trump out when it's time to sue them and say, well, we gave this ownership to this person. That's their purpose. That was the purpose, partially, in my belief, of Puff Daddy getting Revolt TV. I talked to Byron Allen extensively about his lawsuit. You can feel what you feel about him, but no other billionaire brought lawsuits for billions of dollars against AT&T, against Charter, and against Comcast. And in those suits, one of the first things that they brought out is the memorandum of understanding signed by Sharpton and Morial that led to Puffy getting his station. So this memorandum I'm gonna go over in a second, it opened a doorway, and the whole purpose was diversity. So then you open the door, give Revolt TV to Puff Daddy, and Puff Daddy hires a Canadian Indian to fire the black staff. None of this is how a solution works. I'm saying to you, when I look at the whole thing, I got this article from the Washington Post, and it's titled, Music Made Sean Diddy Combs Famous, but here's what made him rich. And the first thing he was doing was pushing, Puff Daddy get on something, he push it. We call that grinding, but I really think y'all look at what he pushing. So now he pushing Black Lives Matter and like Black Power. But back then he was pushing this Ciroc. And what he said is Ciroc was moving money, but not much. It was about 30,000 cases a year. Diageo, who's the real owner of Ciroc, a large conglomerate, owns a lot of different brands of liquor, came and talked to me about creating my own brand. I looked at the opportunity. So I decided to take a chance on the brand. We decided if it does well, we can go 50-50 partners. Well, it did well, and you're not a 50-50 partner. This is the thing that I see. Like, we also got to start looking at this thing. In the article, what he says is Ciroc is a supreme product. Sean John is a supreme product. Revolt TV is but Ciroc is made from the Trebbiano grape. Let me explain. It's the second, it got up to the second moving vodka. The number one is Grey Goose. Grey Goose is made from a refined wheat. It's not made from grapes. Ciroc is made from something called the Trebbiano grape. The Trebbiano grape is a table grape, a filler. There's nothing supreme about the Trebbiano grape. So like when we look and we see Puff Daddy selling us, these cheap clothes and this Trebbiano grape vodka and telling us it's a premium product, Why do we believe that? Why do we? You look over at Revolt TV, they don't have no programming really. Is it even a station? You done fired 30% of the staff. You got the Breakfast Club. That's not a like real program. So what is it other than us that's making you rich? Our willingness and need to see somebody successful. Maybe we making the wrong person successful. So I look at this whole thing and I ask so many questions about not only the article, but where this is all going. This is bigger than Puff Daddy. This is about a whole setup of cover-ups of the fact that black wealth does not exist in this country. We own nearly no land. We own nearly no land. We own nearly no wealth. And we out here struggling. What I want to do is take a brief break, and I'll come back to you in a second. Tone Talk, go to Dash Radio, press the Dash Talk X app, and we'll definitely dig more into this. Yeah, this Tone Talk's back. Thank you for tuning in this Friday. We having this discussion. Part of this thing is we wanted to have a productive discussion about, black wealth and Puff Daddy and Comcast and this memorandum of understanding. But another part of it, I want to talk about you. I want to ask the question of what made you love Puff Daddy. Is it the way he treated Mace? Because when I look at Mace, I got an article here where Mace asked Diddy to release him from Bad Boy. And what Mace was caught walking around V103, and he had what he called freedom papers. Freedom papers. I mean, when you hear that, you can't help but think of slavery and freedom papers. And he was demanding that Diddy sign these papers. Diddy finally signed them. And this is Diddy's words. He has freedom to go wherever he wants to do now. And people have felt like our situation, I may have stopped him or whatever. He can do whatever he wants to do. Everybody's crystal clear. If you want them Mace verse, get your hustle on right now. But then we find out later that Diddy signed only to allow Mace to do songs with other artists. So he is in fact still contractually obligated to Bad Boy. You got so much going on here with just like a mix between I care about black folks to being a cold businessman to the point where you just don't really care about individual black folks. At least that's what it sounds like. I look over at the Shine situation, and you got Shine screaming during the interview with the Village Voice, New York Weekly, about Diddy. He proved that he was just there to save himself. Speaking about the whole shooting incident from 99. And what he said is, there are no boundaries to what he would do to exonerate himself. I had the Bible in front of me and I was just praying that he wouldn't continue to lie. Speaking of Sean Combs. I bring all this up because I think that in so many ways, what we see is that people really don't understand who to follow. They really don't understand that Herbalife ain't good for you. That's, they really don't understand that everything from Ciroc to that, all this stuff. I mean, he's selling liquor. Do you understand what that means? Like, I feel like when we start to really develop this thing, we got to be honest about what are our goals. Are we just trying to create a super capitalist, or are we trying to create a black community? Puff Daddy and Jay-Z put up the post, what's better than one billionaire? Working class of black folks is better than both of that. And so I look and I start to wonder, how do we grow forward? How do we make this thing better and bigger for black folks? Again, you can call 323-879-4445 if you want to give your opinion. But even if you don't, we about to move into a broader view of this thing. Back in 2010, a memorandum of understanding was signed. It's between Comcast Corporation and the African American Leadership Organizations, made up of the Urban League, Sharpton's National Action Network, and the NAACP. And I just want to share a couple of the different sections with you that are from this thing. One is Comcast is dedicated to continuing and enhancing its commitment to diversity and connection with the proposed joint venture. let me explain to you, and I might cut in a section at the end of this whole show that I had in my video from Byron Allen. I interviewed Byron Allen. He's he bought the Weather Channel, and he also has one of the largest catalogs in independent catalogs in all of Hollywood, billionaire. And what he spoke to is the fact that there isn't black ownership, that in so many ways you don't know what black people own because they are allowing themselves to be used as marketing heads. They're allowing themselves to be used just as a name. No different than what we saw with Ciroc, except the Ciroc papers got out. So what happened is Comcast had to come out and do some kind of memorandum of understanding. The problem is it don't say anything. You can go. I'm gonna put this in the actual info section of the video so you can click in and read it on your own. But in large part, all this does is allow Comcast to bring this up when somebody like myself or Byron Allen or you with a group of people decide to make ruckus or even bring litigation. What this says is the MOU is set forth primarily to enhance, this again is this document, the policies and programs by which African Americans may realize greater participation in the 5 focus areas listed in this MOU. Those 5 areas are corporate governance, employment, procurement, programming, and philanthropy. Charity. Byron spoke to that. Anytime they come to us, it's about charity. And that's one of the 5 things. Black folks shut out here in America. Shut out of ownership, shut out of wealth. And then you get the reality of somebody like Puff, who's part of the fabric of covering that up, the decadent veil, trying to act like, where did this come from? Puff Daddy, he spoke to, let me see if I can actually find that. He actually spoke to, for a second, this whole lack of wealth. The man who has always spoke about black excellence and you just need to dream it and achieve it and frequencies and how you just got to outgrind. This is what he finally says. I think I'm getting to him, y'all. We only get 5% of the venture capital invested in things that are black owned. Black owned businesses, black owned ideas, black owned IP. You can't do anything without that money. Let me say that again. He said you can't do anything without that money. If you're blocked out of the resources, you cannot compete. Puff Daddy been telling us to compete regardless for 15 years. I think he watching these videos, these animated videos, and he's starting to understand. Maybe he read that Verity report, put his name in it. And so he's starting to see, you better sell that clothing line if you want to compete. You got an article from Global Brands acquires majority stake in Sean John. Global Brands Holding has purchased a majority stake in Sean John, the men's lifestyle brand founded 18 years ago by hip-hop entrepreneur Sean John. And at the end, what it says is, however, going head-to-head with such powerhouse labels as PVH's Calvin Klein, as well as Polo, Denim, and Ralph Lauren, division of Ralph Lauren, was hard for the privately held company. And so you see him selling this company, selling a majority stake of his clothing line to stay competitive. So much of this is telling the narrative that I tell y'all all the time that we don't have enough to compete. But now Puff Daddy's saying it in a backwards way, that we don't have enough to compete. Part of what makes this actually change isn't self-help books or culture warriors. It's forcing government to recognize why we can't compete, why we've been shut out. Forcing government to repair through reparations what it broke through slavery. I think in many instances, what we feel is that if somebody's in the room that looks like us, we're going to be all right. Well, if that somebody did Mace the way they did Mace, purportedly, as I told you earlier, or did Shine the way that they did Shine, purportedly, as I told you earlier, or did the Locks the way that we saw with the Locks, and you can go Google that with Jadakiss speaking to how, he felt like he was cheated out of some money by Puff Daddy. What you think they're going to do for the greater black community? What do you think they're going to do for the greater black community. I come back to this memorandum of understanding. One of the interesting parts is it has several signatures on it. But one of them that's real interesting and appears to be a conflict is Al Sharpton. You got, chief operating officer of Comcast here. You got the chief diversity officer of Comcast. You got, all these people. Then you got Al Sharpton. How did Al Sharpton end up with a show on MSNBC owned by Comcast after he signed this? Was that the exchange? I mean, he wasn't very good on the show. See, this is what I'm saying. It's like everybody is doing individual stuff until they realize like that the wind is changing and that we coming. And what I say to you guys as listeners, as supporters of the Tone Talk show, is that what you have to do is see through the veil, the decadent veil, and see the truth of, is this person for me? You have to look at the reality of coming out with an article about Culture Warrior and about hiring these folks overseas to be CEOs when you did the same with your own company, Puff Daddy. There's no reason that CEO Roma should have been running Revolt TV. I'm going to say it again. There's no reason that the CEO, Roma Karma, I believe, should have been running Revolt TV. We fought too hard and too long to create Revolt TV. Revolt TV is not yours, Puff Daddy. It is the creation of 100 years of civil rights fights. It is the creation of pushing against all of the white ownership. So then the last people that should have been fired, not the first, are the black folks. And I look and I feel like in many ways, this memorandum of understanding that I'm going to share with you guys plays a major role in it as well. It does nothing uniquely for African Americans. In fact, it explicitly says it won't do anything uniquely for African Americans. Let me see if I can find that section. Because this whole thing is just insane the way it reads. Nothing in this MOU is intended either to disadvantage or to provide favoritism to any community. Now, I'm not going to say it to you again. Reparations is about preference. Reparations is about repairing us to a position of preference in America. Well, this MOU does nothing to give us any kind of preference. In fact, what it does is it includes all kind of diversity. So you can have a white woman that's the husband, that's the daughter of white male wealth. And what she ends up with is the same diversity access that you get after coming from slavery. Tell it. You get a Canadian Indian and you get Puff Daddy himself trying to use the avenue of people of color to include her after she called Meek Mill a boy, after she fired all the black staff, into the access points of diversity. So much of this is about black folks coming to an awakening. We not taking it no more. We not playing this game. You 50, move to the side, let Tone in. I'm telling y'all that we coming. Yvette Carnell has her show on Mondays and Wednesdays. You got Zoe Williams before me. But I'm just telling you as a whole, read my report with Sandy Darity, Dark Hamilton, and several other economists. Because what we need now is a set of politics that pushes the narrative forward. We need to be able to read through all of this mess. We need to read past these articles like, Sean Combs. This is the name of the actual Variety article. Sean Combs slams industry's lack of investment in black enterprise. How can you slam anything? You are the industry. I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. This is Tone Talks. Please go to tonetalks.org, subscribe and donate. Share this video. Let's get the dialogue going. I'll see y'all next week.
That we as a people own and control our image and how we're produced and depicted around the world. And I have said to a lot of people, especially white people, would you be comfortable if I had control over how you were produced and how your children grew up and saw themselves? If they saw themselves as heroes or if they saw themselves as losers? Are you comfortable with that image and me having that control? And unanimously, everyone always says no. And I'd say, then why should I be comfortable letting you have 100% control over how I'm produced and depicted and distributed around the world, and how my children grow up and see themselves? So we must own our own networks and our own platforms and websites and publications that we truly own, and we're not a front for wealthy white people, but we truly own it and control the narrative. That is the reason.
Can you explain that a little bit more when you say, because I've heard that before from you, and I think sometimes it gets lost. In more specific sense, can you explain the difference between black targeted and black owned companies?
Black targeted is black targeted. That doesn't mean that the people who actually own it and care about how you're produced and seen own it and control it. I mean, you want that to be authentic. The ownership needs to be, like, I had the pleasure of growing up with Ebony and Jet on my coffee table, and I knew that I could trust that publication because I knew who owned it, and they were really about inspiring the African American community and helping us to go to the next level. And at the same time, they chronicled all of our successes and made sure that we paid respect to the people who deserve that respect, who had gone on to achieve exceptional levels of success. I think it's important that we have that in our community, and unfortunately we don't, because a lot of advertisers have pushed us to the side, and a lot of distribution systems have pushed us to the side. Now, the reason why I sued, now it's a big deal.
Wait, can I ask you one question? Just so the audience who isn't as aware. When we look at BET, when we look at Aspire, are these black targeted or black owned companies?
They're black targeted, and they're black. Viacom owns BET. And, Aspire, we're asking through legal documents to understand the relationship of Leo Hendry and Aspire. So we want to know, because we want to have real, authentic, 100% African-American ownership of these platforms. We deserve it. Look, the cable industry, this is why I say, hey, black people, wake up and get a calculator. You're a multi-trillion-dollar industry, but you get paid nothing. The cable industry spends $70 billion a year licensing cable networks. $70 billion. Black people get zero. We're the only community that would allow that to happen. No other community would stand for that. We do business with a lot of major corporations. Coca-Cola. They don't spend a nickel with black-owned media for the most part. There are a lot of major corporations out there that pull money out of our neighborhoods, out of our communities, but they're not. See, what happens is, here is that institutionalized racism. When white people talk to other white people about business, they talk about business. When black people go to white corporate America starts talking about charity, donations, and who they've given money to. We're not a charity. We're not a donation. We're not that burden that you need to subsidize because we are a bunch of stupid baboons who can't add 2 + 2. We're a business. We're brilliant. We're resourceful. We're articulate. We're competitive. But white corporate America has a way of treating us like we're a burden and we don't count. And when you look at all the hundreds of billions of dollars that are spent in advertising and none of it going to black-owned media, that speaks to why your newspapers and websites are going out of business and going away, and they don't exist. When you look at $70 billion being spent licensing cable networks and none of it going to black-owned ownership, that speaks to jobs.
Thank you for tuning in to Tone Talks.